If you're an inauthentic leader, your people maybe trust you on like a Thursday.
Right.
But if you're authentic, they trust you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And the best part about Sunday is they're not even thinking about you. So what I want people to hear loud and clear is authenticity takes work. It's not about you, but it's a beautiful thing. It's about exposing who you are when people least expect it. And you're going to get great, great results if you have the little bit of guts to go out and do it.
The voice you just heard was Erin Hatzikostas. And Erin was a delight to talk to. It was wonderful prepping for her, listening to her TED Talks and some of her podcasts. But I got to tell you, talking to her was absolutely fantastic. Con?
Yeah, we dug into a few really good topics. I think this is going to be a fun one. Her books are the first place to start. She first wrote You Do You-ish, which is all about authenticity and authenticity in the workplace, which I think is an important topic. And then her most recent book was an interesting one that we dug into called The 50% Rule. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is later in the podcast.
And we won't even get into it, but it was inspiring for us. And it changed the way that we did this podcast. And frankly, the way I want to approach anything, which you'll learn more about. But it was really, I got to tell you, enlightening for me and sticky. In other words, stuff that I will take with me as a result of this podcast. And I know will help me be a better person.
I mean, Erin's not just an author. She's a keynote speaker, a former corporate CEO. She brings a lot to the table. And I would say the topic that we talked about around the compromise calculation is something that all of us do. And so it'll be great to dig in and understand how to use it.
So let's take a listen to Erin. So welcome to our Be the Sun, Not the Salt podcast. We're very, very honored that you agreed to do this with us, Erin Hatzikostas. And I'm joined by my co-host, Connie Fontaine, to talk about your work, the insights that you can offer the rest of our audience in the world, and to learn some stuff, inspire some of our listeners and maybe some new listeners, and take this where we haven't taken our podcast before. To use one of your expressions, let's 50% this podcast. And for the listeners who don't know anything about us and you, we're going to get into what that means, but you know what that means. So let's take it to a whole new level. Con, you want to add?
Yeah, I do. I want to start with how we found you, because I think one of the things that's so important as a colleague of ours, your sweet spot, a Gen X woman, saw you speak at a speaking engagement and said, she started following you and she thought you'd be a great guest. You bring your authenticity, you bring yourself, and you bring so much about leadership to the work that we thought this was going to be a perfect way to start the week for us.
So good. Thank you.
Yeah, so good is right. And we'll do a formal introduction later, but would love for you to share what you want listeners to know about you.
Yeah. So I was a corporate racer for 22 years. Small town girl, born and raised in Northern Michigan. I will tell you the start of my career kind of came my sophomore year in college. I had dropped out of my engineering program because, quite frankly, I sucked at it. And I was still taking math classes, mainly because I was good at it and nobody else was, which is sort of part of my personal pattern, as I call it. Like if there isn't a lot of competition, that's where I'm going to apply. And so I was taking math classes, but not sure what I was going to do with it. I found myself in a pretty esteemed actuarial internship program. But the good news is I went on to have a great career at a big company, 50,000 people. So I was able to sort of bob and weave. And eventually I found myself in one of those subsidiary companies that was acquired asset and thought, this is a great place, quite frankly, to land where my kids are young. I had been traveling a lot. I took on a sort of a role that was more strategy, business development, not as much travel. And over the years, as somebody would leave, they basically look around and they'd be like, well, maybe we'll give it to Erin. And so I just kept getting promoted. And I think this is important probably for your listeners to hear. This will be somewhat annoying, but hopefully in the end inspiring. It was a Friday. I'll never forget it. My boss texted me, "Can we talk?" And I was working home and, you're just like, oh God, can we talk? What have you got to say? And he actually called me up and he said, actually, this is kind of heavy for a Friday, but I've decided to leave the company. And I want to know if it's okay to recommend you as my successor as COO. And you guys, I like so quickly replied, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And it was this thing that I now call the compromise calculation. But essentially, I was worried. Like, I think so many women and humans, not just women,
Mhm.
we see these big jobs and we know like we can do the job, but we're worried about the jump. And that's what was it for me. I saw myself sort of having to like succumb to this BS and inauthenticity and junk that
Right.
comes with that executive job. And I was like, not worth it, right? Like, I don't want to give up like my more time with my kids, relationship with my husband,
Right.
all the things. But he was smart. It was a Friday. Think about over the weekend. And I asked a bunch of people their opinion. And of course, everybody went, all different
Okay.
directions. And eventually there was something that hit me that, like, I swear to God, if your listeners only listen to one thing I say, other than maybe the 50% rule and a few other things, but it's this, I had this epiphany that you shouldn't not do something because you hate the way it was done before.
Mhm.
Instead, do it your own way. And I was picturing myself as like, I was picturing that, I hate to say
That
it,
person.
that person, right? The guy that had the heart attack, the person
Yeah.
that got divorced, the person that like acted all like pretentious.
Right.
Um, and I eventually said yes. And what happened over the next year is I actually then became CEO and didn't know what I was doing. But in 3 years, we had like tremendous success. We went from a company that was 5 years of flat earnings. We tripled
Mhm.
them. We sent them from 17 million up to 50. Employee engagement went up significantly. And I finally realized that this thing called authenticity that, quite frankly, had gotten me through failing exams, but still getting good jobs at Aetna, had gotten me promoted, was the very thing that not only was helping my career and helping me stand out, but it was the thing that was helping our company too. It was changing our culture. And it was the thing that was like differentiating us and making us stand out. So long story short, I did 3 years of that CEO position, decided to leave, didn't know what I wanted to do, but about 6 months later,
Mhm.
I realized that you could essentially be a thought leader for a living. And now I spend most of my time writing books, doing keynotes, and just obsessing and preaching this concept of authenticity as a strategy.
Ooh. So, Erin, I love that. What do you do? I'm a thought leader for a living. I love the expression and
Mhm.
been listening to and steeping ourselves in your work. And the reason that Connie and I want to 50% this podcast is, quite frankly, we want to both do the here it is, here's the basics, but here's the stuff that's breakthrough for us, for you,
Mhm.
for our listeners. And I love it because it's simple. We like to say more by saying less.
Mhm.
Knowing our book, I, like you, don't like reading nonfiction books and wanted to write one that would be like, oh, that I
Right.
can reference and use and leave behind. And to this day, I still read one chapter a day to remind me of this. Our work too, and your work around authenticity is really powerful. So if you could speak a little bit about the 50% um, rule,
Yeah.
solution of operating so that we can take it to the
Yeah.
next
Tell
level.
us what the rule is so we can do it today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you the rule. And then in true Erin fashion, I'll step back and tell you the story kind of behind it a little bit so you can
Sure.
feel it. So the 50% rule essentially says that anytime you are taking a device, listening to a podcast like this one, starting something new, working on something you really don't want to work on, doing just about anything, only do about half normal, half new. Essentially, take about 50% of the advice, the normal playbook, what is normal, the things feel like you and you want to do, and throw out the stuff that feels inauthentic and maybe it's been there, done that, old and crusty, and you just don't want to do it.
Mhm.
But then make room for the 50% you bring in, like something new, something fresh, etc. And let me take a step back. So, how this came about when I first started talking about authenticity as a strategy and, redefining it and all the things I do sort of in my first book and my first keynote, I was like guns a blazing. But meanwhile, I was actually learning to become an entrepreneur because I had spent 22 years in corporate, right? It's a
Mhm.
totally different ballgame. And I was part of a mastermind. As you guys know, we do a lot of self-development. There's so many gurus. I was in a great program, but I was sitting in Nashville and it was a 2-day deep dive into, I think this one was building your speaking business.
Mhm.
And they like rolled out the red carpet, if you will. It was like an 87-page PowerPoint
Right.
playbook, right? Like, hallelujah, you don't need to make the same mistakes we did. Here's everything. Here's the checklist,
Mhm.
everything you have to do. And I should have been thrilled. And I was completely paralyzed. And I sat there, and of course, like the crappy, I call them the sucky songs rang on. And I was like, oh, there you go, Erin. You sprinted all this time. You've been successful, but now like you've gone too fast. And now you're lazy and it's over. And like no more like
Making it
high
chatter.
ambition, Erin.
Yeah.
And then I sat there and thought, what if you 50% rule it? What if I just give myself permission to toss out half of it, but bring in some creative ideas, et cetera? And immediately I got motivated and excited. And there's actually science behind it. I talk about it in the book. It's called the self-determination theory. And so, all of a sudden I got motivated. And so for me, what happened over like the next year, I would do the same thing. I would not pull out the 50% rule right away. I would get frustrated and stuck and like didn't like what I was doing or whatever. And then I was like, dummy, like do the 50% rule. And then for the next couple of years, honestly, every time, whether it was a formal client or a friend or somebody would come to me with like an issue or problem, they're working on something, it would just like pour out of my mouth. I was like, why don't you 50% rule it? And they'd be like, huh? And I would explain, and I would just watch them unlock. I still to this day, like, gets me so excited, like immediate ideas, thoughts, motivation.
Right.
And then, what got really exciting and why, I ended up writing the book about it was then I realized the 50% rule is like everywhere in the wild. The first time I really noticed it, I went to Hamilton. Have you guys seen, hopefully,
Mhm.
Broadway? Don't ever, I'm going to see it for the third time this fall. I was like, "Oh my god, Lin-Manuel Miranda, 50% ruled Broadway," right?
Mhm.
And then I
Push.
started, I'm a huge sports nut. I was watching the John Madden documentary and him talking about how he almost didn't become a broadcaster, but what did he do? He 50% ruled it, and then he not only was happy doing broadcasting, he changed course of it, right? He became the GOAT of all goats of broadcasting, and I saw it with Weird Al Yankovic, like the worst
Mhm.
ever that is a megastar. He 50% ruled music. And so this rule, this simple rule that simply says always, do about half normal, half new it's motivating because of self-determination theory, but it's also the thing that can help you stand out immediately.
Yeah.
I am not a fan. I feel like there's two camps. Sort of to win, quote unquote, in the world. You either have to be better / work harder than everybody else. I'm just not into that. Or you have to be different, right? You have to 50% rule things. And I do it. I use it all the time to do that. I'll give you a quick example of most recent. Was working on a new speaker reel. Now, I've been speaking for 6 years. It was time. I have some great clips. I still don't have like the mega 1,000-person, right, on the big stage clip.
Great.
I
Mhm.
don't have the standing ovation every time, quite frankly, because I'm gonna be a little petty. I don't have like a sob story that ends in something where people stand
Yeah.
up. And so as I was putting together, just like anything, I know I'm good at what I do, but I'm like, I don't want to try to be the best. I see all these speaker reels. I'm not going to have the best stage. I'm not going to have the best, whatever. And so I 50% ruled it. And so because I talk about authenticity, I actually started out on a big booming stage with it looks like a dramatic. There's a, voice of God. Erin Hatzikostas is a former, CEO turned blah, blah, blah. And then I stop it and I'm like, wait a minute, Ralph, can we just let them hear me speak? And so I kind of make fun. And this was,
Different.
this isn't just fun, it's intellectual. I had heard
Mhm.
that, agents and people want to hear you speak for longer clips. They're sick of the quote unquote sizzle reel. They're sick of everybody having like the dramatic boom, 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 boom. And so when I got done with that reel, not only does it demonstrate my brand, that was part of it too. I wanted to demonstrate authenticity to your point about let's talk real stuff. But like, I don't compare myself to anybody else's reel. Like, I don't sit there and go, oh, but I'm like, mine's just different. It's
Yep.
it's
It's
50%
me.
rule. It's me.
Yeah, the authenticity part of it shines through in the 50% rule. I mean, all your work kind of goes together for
Yeah.
sure. And I think that ability, when you think back to the people, or at least when I think back to the people who stand out in my career and in my life, are those that are do things differently. They shine.
Right.
They just shine brighter in a different way.
Yeah.
And shining brighter in a different way is what we're all about, which is
Yeah.
this heliotropic effect. One of the things that people don't understand, but they sort of do intuitively, is why we're drawn to certain people. We're drawn to the qualities that they exude, which is the scientific effect of this thing called the heliotropic effect. And authenticity, what you talk about, is one of those qualities, like generosity and gratitude and kindness. They're all great, dependability and, a bunch. But authenticity is one of those qualities that when you can feel it and want to be around it and like it, and
Yeah.
you go to town on it, which is why we love this point, and we hope that our listeners go, I want more of that. And whether they get it from this one podcast, let's hope that just this alone sparks that for them, that they 50% rule their next conversation with somebody. I'm going to do it the same way, but I'm going to crack open my own style to blow it open because I just heard it that way. Or they go to town and read your stuff or listen to you, and they get more of it because I got a little taste of it, and then listening to you more and more and more is like, oh yeah, and dug it even more. So thank you for putting it out there, and let's keep trying to 50% this quality.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, one of the ways I want to talk about authenticity, because obviously being your brand, I think you come to us as an expert in that space. Authenticity, for a lot of people, it's important to know doesn't make you weak. It's not something that is meant to be, you wear your heart on your sleeve either. Authenticity is bringing your best version of yourself. And I'd love for you to talk about how you got there. And was it something that was natural? Did you have some sort of epiphany?
Oh, so how I got there, which I probably don't talk about enough. I talk about it a little bit in my book. I was freaking lucky. I had a father that oozed authenticity. And of course, I didn't realize it at the time. It took me
Right.
till I was 40 something writing
You
a
just
book.
didn't label it. Yeah.
He didn't label it, but he was a teacher. He was a teacher for 25 years. I think he retired early, or I know he did. And he would come home every night. I remember my mom was a teacher too, but she was closer. And so she'd come home, she'd already be in the kitchen.
Yeah.
He'd sit down, he'd have his like one Heineken. And I think what a lot of people would do after a long day would sort of, especially teaching, God bless teachers, right? Would be like, bitch and moan about like this kid or this other, right? Like just like lament. And he really didn't. He would tell stories nonstop of how he did things differently. I mean, one of my favorite stories he was talking about these kids and they weren't listening and he was frustrated, and normal would have been yelling at them, punishing them, whatever. And instead, he decided to walk into class that day. He went on the chalkboard and he wrote, I'm a blank, I'm a blank, I'm a blank. And then he had a little tape recorder and he hit play and he walked out of the room. And the kids, of course, these were middle schoolers. They're like, what in the world? And James Taylor, I'm a Steamroller came on. And of course, like the goal of it was, I'm a steamroller, I'm a napalm bomb. They had to fill in the like three things that he said from the song. And that was his way of making the point about the importance of listening. And it demonstrates, one of my key definitions is people that are authentic don't do what's normal, they do what's needed. And so many times normal isn't what's needed because, especially in this world, right, where attention span is so short and like we need to jolt people, we need to wake them up. And he was so good at that. So I hear those stories. And then he actually went on and became a real estate agent for the next, second half of his career. And he crushed it. Like they're heading off to Italy today, actually. Like, thank God, because you weren't doing on a retired teacher's salary. Like he crushed it as a real estate agent, made so much money. And the same stories would come through. Like hilarious stories about how he approached his clients and didn't bullshit them and all this stuff. And so I was so lucky to have that. That is part of my passion, knowing that lot of people don't have that beacon, that demonstration, or they have it and it's like here and there. And so that's why I try to be that. And that's why I'm kind of an annoying guest. I tell like these long stories, but that's part of my formula and my framework and the actions that I give people to take. One of them is to be a narrator, to be a storyteller, because it sticks, because you remember it more. That's what people actually
Makes
need.
point.
And so that's what really, and then, to take it a step further, people, when I went to retire, people kept saying, we're going to miss your authenticity. And that was actually the first time that word really became a badge, if you will. I knew the word, but I hadn't been called it. And I remember thinking, but I don't come into work as the same exact person as if my friend Meg had a pool party this weekend, right? There isn't just a be yourself. I knew that there was a nuanced sort of juxtaposition. And I think, and so I wanted, when I realized that authenticity, this thing that they had put a label on, was my kind of probably my success factor, because I saw it in my father. I saw the success we had as me as a CEO, not knowing what the heck I was doing. And I was like, I want to go teach it. But I'm like, how do you teach something at that time, as most people think, is like, just be yourself. And when I started doing more research, what I realized is the Greek word is authentikos, the Greek root. And it means to be genuine. It means three things. It means to be genuine, but it also means to be original and authoritative. And I was like, yes, that people, not just me, as I reflected on, Michelle Obama or other leaders in my company, they were more nuanced. And I realized that so many people want authenticity, but why do we not have it? Is because we don't make it tangible. We think it's this be yourself. I call it being authentic. Nobody wants that, bringing your whole poopy self to work. And so two things that I think really have helped me make an impact. One is that I define it differently. I define it as authenticity is about exposing who you are when people least expect it, in the service of others. And that is the bombshell that people need to hear. Authenticity is not about you.
Right.
It's about you having a little guts, right? A little creativity, a little guts to go out on the ledge like my dad, to do things that aren't normal, to give other people permission to wake people up from their bad dream of going through the motions. And once you realize that it's not just about you, especially in the workplace where people are so scared that it's indulgent, be myself, which sounds great, but it's going to get me fired. Then they're like, oh, not only does that make sense for themselves, but they can see it in other people.
Sure.
So that, in between that, and then, in the framework that I do there, and then this 50% rule, which you're right, it's like it's a authenticity hack, I call it. The 50% rule is not something anybody listening to this podcast should say, I've never done that.
Right.
Nobody should say that. But I will tell you that even when I was writing the book, I had some things, like health issues I had, that I was like, it took me a while. And I was like, you idiot, 50% rule it. Like having this like nomenclature, this thing that, is a great team sport, to be able to go into a team meeting and people are like, oh, what should we do? I hate that we have to do that. And then they're like, well, why don't we 50% rule it? I'm telling you, something clicks in your head and it makes you take that action that you should do, but a lot of times aren't doing.
Well, you take the ropes off of people. You give them the willingness, the ability, and you trust them to think differently, which would inspire creativity.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you give people a very simple, for lack of their expression, lens, way of thinking that snaps us out of I've always done it this way, to be better, a smidgen better. This whole effort of ours is to exaggerate and emphasize, do more of what you already do when you are at your best. That's what it means. You're not going to be a different person, but when you're magnificent, do that some more. Well, what do you mean? Well, we'll call it 50%. You started like that and then you did it so differently. We want people who listen to this go, oh my God, I can do that. This is not a bridge too far. I don't have to sign up for anything. I can do it from this moment on. I can listen to this podcast and immediately the next thing I do, I can make it a smidgen better. And I'm gonna, because I That's what it means. I love the simplicity. I love the utility. That's why I think will help a shit ton of people.
Yeah, and I love it though. I mean, I read through the book, which is just magnificent. And you 50% ruled your book.
I know.
It's not the normal, like, right, 50,000, 60,000 words. It's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is needed. What
Yes.
now is what is normal. When I read it, and I love number 4. You say show you care, and of course, I mean, I saw the word, but I also love the swear that's not written. You know, someone else I know refers to it as authentic. Give a poop, right?
Yes.
You do, and just to talk about it just a tiny bit more. The other thing I want people to hear is that it is not a risk. There is a safety net of data and research that we did
Mhm.
that shows what is intuitive to you,
Right.
which is, and also not intuitive. Like our research shows, for example, that boomers want authenticity in the workplace more than Gen Z. It's everybody thinks, oh, well, you know, those youngins,
Young
they're the
kids.
ones. But it's actually those of us, I'm in Gen X, but like they've been in the workplace for like 30 plus years. And we're like, yeah, we want it. Why you don't think we do? Because we've kind of just like waved the white flag at this point. We're like, I give up, right?
Yep.
Like I've been dealing with like same crap, different day. You know, we found executives want it more than individual contributors, you know, and then we found that like people are, you know, 4 times more likely to follow a leader if they leave the company, if they were authentic. We found that trust goes up by 600%, which I always love to say,
Trust is
look,
huge.
if you're an inauthentic leader, like your people maybe trust you on like a Thursday,
Right.
but if you're authentic, they trust you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And the best part about Sunday is they're not even thinking about you. So what I want people to hear loud and clear is authenticity takes work. It's not about you, but it's a beautiful thing. It's about exposing who you are when people least expect it. And you're going to get great results if you have the little bit of guts to go out and do it.
That's
Love
right.
But
Yeah.
I would ask you, chapter 4, the current CEO of the company that sponsors this podcast, the current CEO, that he inspired me to write that chapter. That's his.
Mm,
And he,
Mhm.
I mean, one of the things that when I coached executives, when they would give speeches, it was the same thing you're saying. I'd say you have to be authentic, vulnerable, authentically vulnerable, which is not vulnerability in the service of
Yep.
this. And they'll think this about me. That's not authentic vulnerability. Oh, you know this. It's being real. What did you say? Expose who you are when they least expect it in the purest way, because
Right.
it creates immediate connection and, to your point, trust. And we can't do it enough. And it's not like, oh, yeah, I do that. All of us do it. So do it some more, do it a little bit more, do it a little bit better, period.
And do it a little bit more. Can I give a tiny bit of tough love to, you know, maybe your CEO that's listening, maybe executives, other executives? Here's the little bit of tough love that I want to serve you with. You may think you're authentic all of the time. Here's where it breaks down usually. You're authentic in your one-on-ones, your team meetings. Why do most people get surprised at the data that executives want it more and also get a signal that executives don't sort of want authenticity? Because you're handlers, and your handlers are wonderful people. I'm talking your chief of staffs, your corporate comp people. But
Yep.
what happens, like when you get ready for a town hall, it's so easy to be like, hey, chief of staff, like get my PowerPoint ready, talking point, 30 minutes before you're looking at them. Now you're doing, no, it takes work. You need to stop that crap. You need to come in messy. You need to come in with an inspiring story. You need to tell people what's needed, not what's normal. You know, your HR and your corporate comms, like
Right.
you actually need to get a hold of those and put some of you in them, because those people, God bless them, but they think they're trying to do it right by putting in
Yeah,
the big
help
word
your
or the fancy and making you sound smart. And as soon as you sound too smart, I guarantee you do not sound authentic. So, all right.
I think that's great advice for people at all levels. Don't
Yeah.
try and be that other person. You talked about that with your very first story. You don't have to be the CEO the way somebody else was the CEO. You don't have to do anything the way anybody else does it. You have to bring your authentic self to the role. And that makes
Yeah.
the difference.
Yeah.
I-
And
that's
one
a
other
great
point, not to be like a total like annoying, but let me make this one other point because it's so relevant. What is happening now with AI is such a shift.
Yeah.
In the past, people, the inauthentic crud, it still sounded polished, it sounded human.
Yeah.
You would put up with it, even if you're like, I don't know what they just said. What's happening with AI, and you guys have seen this, I'm sure, is that as soon as something's too polished, what do we think? It was written by a bot, right? Like the email was written.
Yep.
And so I actually love AI because I've noticed people all of a sudden calling out inauthentic BS because they think it's from a bot. And I'm like, I don't care who puts it out. I
That's
don't
right.
care if it's human or a bot. But now that we're in this world where trust, you almost have to be messy. You almost have to not have the comma in the right place or the M dash or use the perfect language. Because
point.
if you do, actually, people are going to be more suspect that it's not really you. So, like, now it's not only nice to have, I think it's an imperative to gain trust internally and externally.
That's a good point. Be a little rough around the edges. Be yourself.
Yep.
And this notion that you have to work at it is a paradox, because what we
Mhm.
want to believe is be yourself, which means why should I work at being myself? Well, that's the conundrum. What do you mean? Well, you don't show them everything. It's inappropriate. It's TMI. But I love what you said. What could I share with you that is about helping you, that is in the service of you, that is offering, that is a generous quality? One of the things that we know is that we feel things that we don't understand why we feel, but there's a reason why we feel it. Why do I trust this person? Why do I distrust this person? Why do I like this person?
Right.
Why do I want to be around this person? Why am I attracted to this person? Why am I recoiled by this person? We can't quite put our finger on it, but the reasons are real. And what we're talking about are those reasons. When we can get it, that juicy goodness that makes somebody go, oh, yeah. That's what we're after. And it does take some effort and some work, which is
Always.
the deal. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Totally.
And that's the point you made too. It's you wrote the book on authenticity. You wrote the book on the 50%, and you still have to remind yourself. And it's what we talk about all the time. You are probably a naturally heliotropic person, I'm going to guess, with all the interactions we've had, but you probably have to work at it. We do.
Yeah.
You know, he wrote the book. We talk about it every day, all day. And yet we all find ourselves getting caught. It's the way we're wired.
Absolutely.
Be protective of ourselves, be defensive. And it's finding that best self. When do I show up at how do I look when I am at my best? And it's a good reminder.
Yep.
Erin, can you talk about the A-hole manifesto?
Oh my gosh, you really did get in deep to you do you-ish. That was definitely a 50% ruled thing. The A-hole manifesto. When I wrote my first book, actually one of my biggest cheerleaders was my kid's like part-time nanny that I didn't need as much anymore because I was more flexible at home, and she became like this apprentice. It was very much a blind leading the blind as I started my business. And so she helped me with so many things. And when I was writing it, she was like, we need like a name, something, and she's young and smart. And she's like, this podcast has, they call them whatever. And so we were like, what can we use to unite? And then, of course, we're like, it has to be sassy because that's sort of my brand. And we sort of played with like, what are we trying to do? And the A-hole acronym stands for authentic humans. Oh my God, I haven't said this. It's something lousy energy. Basically getting rid of lousy energy. Yeah. I forget. For some reason.
I like that.
And because we're like, that's the authentic way to say it. Like we're trying to get rid of lousy energy. And so then we created this manifesto that essentially is like a Mad Lib. And so people can, if they read the book, they get the only place you can actually get the link to get a customized manifesto is in that book. It exists nowhere else. In You Do You-ish. And so what people do is they send in, we have them fill out and answer a bunch of questions, everything from like their favorite snack food to a storm to their nickname. And then I send them back a video of like their customized A-hole manifesto. And it's just meant to pump them up. It's meant to unite them. It's meant to connect, obviously, the author with the readers. And it's silly, but hopefully fun too.
Look, I liked it because it was a reminder to pay attention to the energy you're putting out there. And being heliotropic, being the sun, not the salt, is the essence of that same thing, which is what kind of energy are we putting out in the world?
Yeah.
Period. In the tiniest ways that we behave, we all behave. I can behave better, and I want to behave better for the
And I
benefit.
can't think of a better time for your movement, your book, than right now. Like, I mean, if we're not divided, I don't know what divided is. If we're not all feeling anxious, or if we're not feeling frustrated, overworked, whatever, whether it's the macro or the micro, like, we need that. And if every person can just do one of the chapters a day, we might survive all this crap.
Absolutely. And talk about people trying. So authenticity for some, a lot of your audience, I'm going to guess, are also lower level, middle level managers who are aspiring to, be higher in their career, and they're afraid of being authentic.
Yeah.
What's a baby step to that? How do you coach somebody in that space?
Yeah. It's funny. I always say I don't change people. I change their addiction. Meaning, part of this is about doing things and then actually collecting the data. And that's a fancy term for basically like observe what happens. And my gateway drug, to keep the horrible analogy going, is changing their out of office message. And when I first started telling people of this, and then I was like, this is so silly and stupid. I can't tell you every talk I do, like, I get at least a couple messages about people changing their out of office message. It's low hanging fruit. Every time you are out a day, there's like 100 messages, unfortunately, going out the door because you're getting so many emails. And you're probably sound like, I will be out of the office. I will get back to you as soon as possible. Like, you sound as robotic and bland. And it's a great opportunity. And I actually just did a YouTube video on this. Like, there's just 3 simple hacks. 1, tell the truth. Like, if you don't want to be super funny or whatever, just be like, I'm going to a softball tournament in Florida for my daughter. I'm taking a long weekend. Like, what a great way. You know how many people can connect with that, whether their daughter used to play softball or they used to go to hockey tournaments, etc. The second is tell a story. Stories are so much, like, tell why you're going to that tournament, or tell about a client meeting you're going to and how you became a client with them. What a great way for their client to see it, prospects, etc. And then the third is give them something of value. And I'm not even talking like, here's our latest industry report. Like, nobody really wants that. Like, you can put that in your signature, but like silly things. Like, right now, I'm like so obsessed with this show called Shrinking that's on Apple TV.
Great
like,
show.
I'm like, I can talk about authenticity, I can talk my books, like, but I'm like, you gotta watch Shrinking. Like, it's a game changing like show, and I'm always looking for something good like that. So like little things, right? A video you just saw that inspired you, an article you read that you thought they would, So changing your out of office is such a gateway drug. And then just watch and observe how people connect with it, how it changes. That's just one of the most simple, little steps.
Not that you need this affirmation, but we received an out of office from you when we were trying to set this discussion up. And I instantly knew we had something in common. I'm in Northern Michigan.
Honestly,
so we're in Pentwater.
Oh my gosh.
So we're on the West Coast, not as high up as you were from, but I instantly felt this connection with you and this warmth, and I was like, I can't wait to talk to her more about X, Y, and Z. So and it gave me an affirmation, like, you're a mom, you're out chasing it all. And you don't need that affirmation, but for those that are listening, I thought sometimes cheesy out of offices were really reflective of something, and they weren't always good, but the way you're explaining it is a really positive way to do it.
Yeah.
I just want to underline again, thank you for that, but get addicted to something great. I love the expression. I love the thinking. It is about becoming a positive deviant. It's about becoming really addicted to great things of anything. And I love this journey. I'm one of these old white men that you talk about.
I do not. What are you talking about?
And I'm addicted to becoming great. I'm addicted to becoming a great human being in the tiniest ways. And you gave me that, so let's pass it on to others so that they can become addicted to good stuff, their own good stuff. Thank you for that, Erin, in the tiniest ways.
Yeah.
So we're up the game for people who are listening to this and going, yeah, I want to get addicted to something great. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're already a great human. You're just getting greater and greater.
That's
Let's
right.
be- let's be-
I'm already a good person, or maybe even a great person. I want to become a greater person or a gooder
Yeah.
person. And I'm good with that.
Yep.
And-
But I think attitude-wise, one of the things that you just even the title of your podcast, is it because work doesn't have to suck or
That's
something?
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is such a, and people do that all the time. Oh, work. Oh, here we go again. And I love the idea of putting that idea of it doesn't have to suck. Get addicted to making it not suck. And I think find all the things you do love about it, the people you want to be with, the people that bring out the best in you. What a great way to make sure your day doesn't suck or work doesn't suck. I think that's a great way to think about addiction to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I read a chapter every day to remind myself, and I wrote the book, and only a couple of years ago, I just started doing that. And that today's chapter is filling the potholes of the street you don't walk down.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that. What do you call it? Parable?
Parable of the pothole, which
the
is,
pothole is a great one.
it's not just avoid the stuff. It's not just, take care of yourself. It's go do something for someone that you'll never see. Plant the orchard for you'll never harvest those fruits. And your co-host on Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck, she made her career out of helping others that she'll never see and be a part of. And I love the sort of the lifting quality of that. And I'm hoping, and I was writing my little note this morning to a couple hundred people about this podcast, and we're trying to fill in a pothole for the street that other people might down. We'll never know whether this makes a difference in someone's life, but we're trying. That's our purpose. That's what we're trying to do, right, Erin?
I love it, and that one stuck with me so much too, because it's not just about that people won't see. It's like that wasn't his job to fix the pothole, right? He complained and complained and complained just to like summarize it. People are, and then but the potholes, and then came back to the street years later and was like, oh, I could just fix the pothole, and that's so connected with what I teach, because I'm like, you sort of look around with all the BS and the work and the suck, and you're like, who's going to save me? Who's going to save me? And it's like, nobody's going to save you. Nobody's going to fill the pothole for you.
Yeah. Let's say your favorite, your favorite story about Bobby, Harry, where you said, that poor person, like somebody needs to like bring her dinner or something. And you said, yeah, somebody should, Bobby. Yeah. It's too easy to come up with ideas for other people. One thing I want to make sure we get a chance to dig into a little bit before we lose you is the whole compromise calculation, because as a woman who went through business probably just a little ahead of you, I did that all the time. There was the compromise, the story that you tell, that you just told us about, the COO position. I often measured my ability to take the next job by what I was going to give up. And it was usually based on being a mom, a good wife. I didn't know what I was going to have to give up. And I often modeled my behavior, what my anticipated behavior would be against that person who had that role then, or what I believed the expectations to be. And I didn't learn soon enough about this. And so when I first heard Sheryl Sandberg talk about leaning in, I thought, I need to share this with all the young women that I come across. This is something I use a lot in mentoring, and I'd love for you to share that so that we can make a difference today for those that are making that same mistake.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it's, the compromise calculation is essentially this graph that we think to be true, which if you just picture an anti-correlated line that says every time your career takes a step forward, everything else in your life goes down. Time with your family, your health, because you're who you are, right? It's sort of like a tit for tat. And it can be that. I think for a lot of people, they think that because they think I'm going to do what I'm doing plus, instead of I'm going to do a different job and I'm going to do it a different way than everybody else. Right. And, there's a lot of components to this, but the tough love zinger I'll give you, if you think that next job, you're going to be working harder and you do, that means you're leading worser. And I know worser's not a word, but like,
yes.
If you, when I climbed the ladder, yes, when I became CEO, where there are times where I was dealing with some big stuff.
Right.
Absolutely. Like, I had some tough phone calls on Friday nights at 9 o'clock. We had to
Sure.
deal with some stuff. But also, was I sitting in my bed doing PowerPoints at 10:30 at night like I did before? No, because I had other people and I led them
Right.
and I trusted them. And so I think part of it is we think it's a us plus. I think also I really have been observing since I've been on the outside, like, why are so many of my, quite frankly, I'm going to be honest, my female friends so much more burnt out, frustrated in the corporate workplace than my male friends
Mhm.
at their level. Like, I have some male friends that are in big, important jobs, and I have some female friends that are in big, important jobs. And I think women sometimes our ability to buck that stuff and not have it stress us and to not actually change how the game is done. We struggle with that. And it goes back to, like, people pleasing and worrying about
Sure.
being and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so, I think you can take those bigger jobs. You have to work on different things, though. You have to
Mhm.
put on some bigger calluses on your heart. You have to, you have to put back on certain things. And it doesn't mean you become somebody you're not, but you have to also understand that the job is different. And so
Mhm.
it's really tough. I just really want to wake people up to, I talk about in my TED talk that, like, the people, women aren't necessarily being held back.
Right.
They're opting down.
Mhm.
We're not opting out either. We're opting down. Like I almost did with the COO position. I'm like, I'm good where I'm at because compromise calculation might tip over.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yep. And it took my first female executive to tell me, "You're an executive already. What do you mean you can't do that next job? You just do it your way." And I think that's what so many of us want to share with, and it is mostly young women. I did a presentation once, "What would your brother do?" As a point to say, this is, you got to be able to answer the question in a different way. And if you all called your brother to say, "What should I do?" He'd say, "Take the job, sister. What are you doing?" So I think this is a really important message, and I'm glad we got to talk about that today too. Let's
Speak,
talk about
speaking
that.
to two women in corporate America, and both you were in corporate America and left. Now Connie actually joined a different corporation. I'd love for your insights for people now. Like, man, I wish I knew then what I know now, but I do know it now. So give all the women listening a couple of nuggets.
I'll do mine's
Go
easier
ahead,
because
Connie. Yeah.
I joined a company that so the company that Harry said sponsors us that we work with right
Mm.
now is
Woman.
run by a woman.
Mhm.
And she's somebody who you would want to model. And she is somebody who's so humble and such a great leader that it doesn't feel like what we would have called corporate America. So that's just how I did it differently is I unretired and joined an organization that was everything. If I could build a company, this is what it would be. So mine's an easier answer.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I think that's great. That's the best case scenario. You go and do that. The caution is that's hard to find, or those
Right.
those people change, and so you also can't rely on that. If I were just like, there's so many things outside of just be more authentic. You know what I would say? I would say be a thought leader for a living. Like, and I don't mean for a living like we are, but within your corporate walls. One of the things I do coach some executive women that don't have enough time or mentorship or whatever is starting to get into those positions and be a thought leader. Put
Mhm.
formulas around things that you did, name things,
Yeah.
write articles. Like, nobody sits you down at any part of your career when you're like changing from individual contributor to manager. Like, I wish we had like almost like bat mitzvahs or something every time you like took on and it was like, okay, guess what? Everything's changing.
Mhm.
But if I had a bat mitzvah or something for that person trying to get an executive role, I don't think they realize how powerful their thought leadership could be, not just in mentoring, but in meetings, in team leadership, and how much that is admired and seen
Right.
by the people making the decisions about who should come up next. I mean,
Mhm.
I was doing that all the time. I was always like, who, when we have our next, and I got to be honest, those people that were working really hard were giving like super complicated details and emails or sweating it out. Like, they were not on my radar.
Right.
It was those people that were truly the great leaders. They were thought leaders. They were doing things unique. They were slowing down to go fast. And I maybe figured that out towards the end, but now that I'm doing it on the outside, I'm like, I could have done this more
So
on the
much
inside.
sooner.
It's not so binary.
Yep. I think that's great advice. That's probably great advice for us to end on, I think.
Love
Do you
it.
have anything else you'd like to share? I mean, this is again to your point, we do this for a living and you do this for a living to make a difference for people. Anything we haven't covered or any other point you'd like to make before we close?
I just want to shine a light on, no pun intended. I said you 50% ruled the book. I also was aware of your relationship with Holman and how this podcast, that is it is 50% ruling things.
Yeah.
Like, I want to scream at so many corporate leaders that are trying to do culture by like putting out the like fancy words and all, the hiring the leadership consultants. I'm sorry, that have been in HR for 30 years. Like, not only is this probably really helping their culture internally, but it's such a differentiator externally. And the fact that they've partnered with you to do this podcast, like, that is the 50% rule. It's genius. And I just want anyone listening in other companies to maybe not even replicate exactly that, but to think differently, like you have, like the company has, and like I try to teach.
I so
Well,
appreciate.
yeah.
You know what? You inspired me this morning because I was, we were prepping a little bit. I looked at your website and I downloaded the last chapter of You Set Roll. And because of that, I'm going to keep talking about it. I wrote 30 chapters, and I think the 31st should be an executive shared this great idea. I say all the time, this stuff is so easy, it's easy not to do. I am going to do what you did and put it out there for people to get, which is, I have to write it very short. I haven't written it yet. It was just this morning. I'll credit you. Yeah. It's so easy. It's easy to not. It's easy to walk right past somebody and say nothing. It's easy to not hold the door. It's easy to not say please and thank you. It's easy to not be authentic. It's easy to not do this stuff, but it's also easy to do. And I so appreciate you inspiring us, giving us this time and love and authentic self. And what a gift, girl.
Same to you guys. This has been such a gift for me as well.
Good. Well, it was a fun day for us, and I appreciate the time as well. Thank you.
So we 50%ed it.